We're just here to welcome everybody here. I'm April Swenby. I'm the administrator of the Sandhill Watershed. This is Zach Herman. He's from Houston Engineering. He's our lead engineer for the watershed. We do have 3 board managers here. So we have Sean Renton, Clayton Bartz, and Don Anderson. Yep. So this is considered a regular meeting of the watershed, Sandhill River Watershed District. Giving you a form. Fire people, all the Clayton's over by McIntosh area, Sean's in Neilsville, and then Don lives in Union Lake, but kind of has the land area right adjacent.
Things around this neighborhood.
Yeah, so you probably all know them. Project 17. I'm just going to pass it on to Zach a little bit now to kind of go over the history of where it started and where we're at, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth.
Sure, sounds good. So if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to sit here because I'm going to flip through the slides. But first thing, just a little bit of history about the project. I think most of you are familiar with it, but it's a public drainage system. The Sandhill Watershed District is the drainage authority in the system. So it's actually owned by those that are benefited from the system and pay taxes towards the system, and the drainage authority acts as the caretaker for the system. So that's kind of a process that's outlined in Minnesota state law, essentially. So the project consisted of improvements to several systems. You see them listed on the screen, as well as establishment of a new ditch west of Highway 9. Again, I mentioned this already, but the watershed is the drainage authority for the system. Been out there for almost 20 years now. So, it went through the final hearing in 2005. I believe bids were let in 2005 with construction complete in 2006. As is common with a lot of these systems, to keep the annual assessment down, the construction was funded through a bond that was put on to the benefiting acres. That was fully paid off in 2016. So the project, the implementation piece is fully paid off. Anything that's being taxed now going forward is more for operating and maintaining the system, essentially, which is the responsibility of the watershed district. The location of where we're actually talking about, again, I think most people here are familiar with it, but when you look at the map, you can see Climax up in this area of the screen, Beltrami down kind of in the southern central area of the screen here, and then the system that's actually Project 17 that the watershed district maintains is the red and yellow dash line that you see there. So you can see it primarily parallels County Road 41 to the east of Climax out to Highway 9. From there, it goes south a couple of miles. And then there's an extension that actually goes to the east, another roughly 2 miles, where it basically intersects with Maple Creek. A little background, I guess, in terms of why we're here. We're here to discuss some maintenance things that we'd like to get some input from you guys on today before we move forward with those actions. The reason that we're here is the watershed district. I hit on this a little bit, but as it's spelled out in state statute, I've highlighted kind of the main things here. The drainage authority shall maintain the drainage system that is located in its jurisdiction. So in this case, the Project 17 system is within the Sandhill Watershed District, and the watershed serves as the drainage authority for that system. So it gets a little confusing for some of you out there, maybe, because we do have watershed ditches and we also have county ditches. If it were a county ditch, it would actually be administered through Polk County. In this case, it's a watershed ditch, so it's administered through the watershed district. And then ultimately, it's the responsibility of the drainage authority, that second highlighted passage, to provide the repairs necessary to make the drainage system efficient. So, the project was implemented and put in, and the intent is to provide drainage benefits to the benefiting landowners for the system. And the responsibility of the drainage authority is to act as that caretaker to ensure that those benefits are provided. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the system is going to look exactly the way it was put in all the time. Largely, it's more from a hydraulic adequacy to ensure that drainage is still attained consistent with when the project was initially built. So
what do you mean by it just may not look the same?
Well, in some cases, from a you may have deficiencies within the system that you want to take care of. and the Drainage Authority may elect to do that because it has potential to adversely affect the drainage into the future. But there may be things in the system that don't necessarily affect the benefit that the system's intended to provide. So, if you have, a section of channel that's deeper than, that is quite a bit deeper than what's needed for the drainage benefits, let's say. If there's plugging and that's not influencing drainage anywhere else, there comes into question, should that be maintained to provide the benefits, essentially? So the focus of maintenance is to ensure the benefits stay provided by the system, essentially. So, and a lot of times we try and be proactive, if we see sloughing or things like that, to go fix those issues, because if we don't fix them now, when they do become an issue for the drainage benefits, they'll be much more costly to go out there and fix. Yep. So as part of our role as the Drainage Authority, we try and be as proactive as we can in identifying issues out there. April and I conduct an annual inspection of all the drainage systems within the Watershed District. We try and time it for the springtime, for sure at some point over the summer. There's a lot of miles of drainage system, and there's things that we just miss, quite frankly, and we really rely on people bringing things forward as well to identify issues. But we try and do as best we can to identify what's out there, and at a minimum, document what's out there. If it's urgent, we take action immediately. Or in this case, this is something that we've been noticing for the past several years, and we wanted to get some input from you all as landowners before we take action on it. So you see a few things highlighted on the screen here. I would say the larger issues. There's obviously small things that we fix here and there, like pipes that maybe get damaged or things like that. But kind of, if I had to lump three of the larger issues, is erosion at the outlet. So just to the east of town here, where it kind of goes off of Polk 41 to the south. Within that channel, we've seen a lot of bank sloughing and erosion. That's one area that we've been keeping an eye on. All along Polk 41, it sure appears that there's getting to be more and more sediment building up within the channel along Polk County 41. That's really what we'll get into in a little bit here. And then also the bank sloughing west of Highway 9. So those of you familiar with that area, if you turn onto Polk 41 at Highway 9 and go west, well, it's probably within 500-600 feet to the intersection with the railroad tracks, I would guess. And you look to the south, there's a bank slough that's really been present there since the ditch was initially established. We haven't taken action to fix that yet, but I'll get into that in this next slide as to why. So first, I'm just going to hit on those two, the erosion at the outlet and the bank sloughing west of Highway 9. So recognizing there's a large kind of sedimentation water quality benefit there. One advantage of the Watershed District serving as the ditch authority for the system is we kind of have a lens into these outside funding sources to address some of these issues. So like at the outlet of the project where it goes south off of Polk County 41, we were successful about 2 years ago in securing a grant to do some work within the channel there through the state of Minnesota. And we applied for the grant more so under the guise of clean water for the Sandhill River, which is immediately downstream of it, knowing that fixing that is also going to solve a lot of kind of ditch system issues as well. So we secured that grant. That grant would go and put rock stabilization structures in, or essentially kind of speed bumps to make sure that the water, can't continually erode the bottom of the channel. We secured a grant for that. That'll cover about 80% of the project costs. We've actually recently applied for an additional kind of phase to that grant that we haven't heard back yet. I was hoping we'd hear by this meeting, but we just haven't heard back yet. But would do some additional work to actually do the earthwork to level some of those failing side slopes. For those of you that are familiar, when you look south off of Polk County 41, you see the big sloughs that have shown up in that natural channel, to go back and fix some of that as well. So I suspect we'll hear back from that this week, hopefully, in terms of whether or not we get that. But either way, we've been able to secure a pretty good chunk of outside funding for those for that location. So knock on wood, either this summer or next summer, we'll be in there doing work to solve those issues, depending on what we hear on this other grant that we applied for. And the bank sloughing west of Highway 9. So again, another advantage of the Watershed District, just kind of in terms of ties to potential outside funding, is there's this program called the One Watershed, One Plan. And essentially what that is the state mandates that watershed districts have to develop a watershed management plan on a 10-year cycle. And this is kind of the new way the state has put out there to do the planning cycle. And it encompasses everything from drainage to flood control to water quality to really all the resource interests within the watershed. And what comes out of that, the incentive for doing that process, is the state issues non-competitive funds back to that watershed once the plan is complete and adopted, which we just recently completed and got adopted. So pretty good chunk of funds. I can't remember what the dollar amount estimated right now for the sand bill, but
70.
yeah, and it may be going up from there is my understanding. So, that's not just the watershed district. That gets split amongst the SWCDs to work with landowners on their farms and things like that. We've got a lot of other things in the watershed that we're trying to fix as well. But this is one area that's been identified as a priority area for the watershed where that bank sloughing is occurring west of Highway 9. And our intent is to use those funds essentially to address that issue. And those funds are, in terms of what's required, they're about a 90% state fund and a 10% local fund is the maximum that you can leverage it. So just by going through that, it may create some opportunity for outside funding. So we're trying to figure out ways how to address that. We anticipate for that one small area that could be a fairly expensive fix to go in there and try and address it. We think there's some type of sand blends under the ground where we've got a lot of water movement subsurface that's causing some of the instability. But again, trying to leverage some outside funds for those two locations. So kind of the meat of what we wanted to talk about today is some of the sedimentation that's happening within the channel. So the area that we're primarily looking at here, we've noted it kind of throughout this stretch. All along, it's about 10.5 miles of channel. We've seen varying degrees of what appears to be sediment accumulation. I'm sure some of you, if you've driven by and have noticed, there's a lot of, ponding water that occurs. A lot of aquatic vegetation is growing in the channel. We suspect we've got a lot of kind of high spots, low spots, things like that within the channel itself. We've been watching it for, since I've been involved with the watershed, so about 10 years now. We've been just kind of keeping an eye on it. It does seem like it's slowly progressing to get a little more and a little more. And we just wanted to bring it forward to the group this year to kind of lay out some options of what it could look like to do some maintenance on that stretch to clean out the sediment. So one of the challenges with that stretch of channel is, well, maybe I'll get into the pictures here first, but just to show you some pictures from the inspection. As I mentioned, we try and do them in the spring. And I think these pictures probably tell you why, because these were actually done in August. We have this past year. You can tell the vegetation is kind of fully grown, so it's hard to see some things. But last year was done a little later because we were waiting for some new technology to help with the inspections. But you can kind of see through the pictures there, ponded water. You see a lot of kind of darker, more aquatic vegetation in the bottom of the channel, very indicative of sediment buildup occurring within the channel. I've just got a few pictures just to show you at different spots along the channel. Kind of a similar thing. We see this a lot at some of the culverts where I suspect we have higher velocity through the culvert, creates a little bit of a pool, and then some of that sediment just deposits immediately downstream of it. Kind of a similar thing. These pictures kind of all look very similar, but just to kind of show you what we're seeing out there in the springtime, especially this year's actually a good spring to see it, provided we don't get substantial runoff, because you can see the ponding and some of that occurring with lower flow in the channel, which we haven't really had an opportunity to do the last two springs with the flooding. So, and then just to the east of Highway 9, I just showed for representative as well. So what we had laid out here was a few options. So first option is we can just continue on the path we're on. We can just continue to monitor what's going on out there, continue to reevaluate what those needs might be in the future if we see additional sedimentation in the channel. We do feel at some point some work is going to be required to ensure that the drainage benefits are still adequately provided out there. And that's going to, that's kind of a requirement of the drainage authority based on our statutory authority to ensure that those benefits are provided. But but we could go down that path just to continue to monitor into the future and kind of, come back as we think things are continuing to progress or more work is needed. Option 2 would be a phased approach. So this is, right now the Watershed District has the ability as the drainage authority to assess need and then determine what we want to levy against the system for maintenance. And we'll get into that in a few slides here, but then they can carry a maintenance account for the system that can be used to go out and address things kind of as they come up. A lot of times, like post-spring flood, it's really advantageous to have the funds available to go out and do the work and fix things up immediately after the flood, rather than having to wait for FEMA to approve things or not sitting out there with damaged infrastructure for months on end. So we think this phased approach overall would likely be one of the more expensive options because your construction costs are going to continue to rise on an annual basis. We've certainly seen that through the last 5 years, that construction is getting more expensive. Obviously, fuel is probably a big driving factor of that when we're talking about moving dirt. The other option we laid out here is a large repair, and these costs are very, very high level. So this essentially was just coordinating with a contractor that has equipment to do the work if they were to do it all at once. One of the concerns they have is because of the depth of the channel, they may end up moving the dirt twice to be able to get it up on top to place it. Whether you do that with a long reach or you move it twice with a regular excavator, from what I'm told, it's not a huge savings either way because you just can't move as much with a long reach either. So these are pretty high level cost estimates at this point. If we did go down that route, the dollar amount likely would be high enough that the watershed would have to do a competitive public bid process with contractors. So, we would, essentially advertise for bid. Eligible contractors would put together their bid. We'd open it and then we'd award the lowest qualifying bidder. So that's what would actually dictate what the costs are that are assessed back to the system. But just for rough budgetary numbers, wanted to present that it's more than kind of the standard ditch cleaning. So there are some advantages. Obviously, we can do the work all in one season. So all the disturbance along that channel would occur within one season, ideally. There's a lot of upfront costs is probably the downside, right? It's an expensive cost to do all at once. Albeit long term, we think it could be cheaper because we're doing it all under one contract. We're trying to do things sooner before inflation really kicks in. But I would say one of the challenges is, our intent wouldn't be to assess. I can't speak for the watershed, but my understanding is the intent wouldn't be to assess this full dollar amount in 1 year. It would actually be put onto the system and it would be paid back kind of slowly over time. We're really fortunate that the Watershed District is in a strong cash position that they can kind of help fund some of these things by borrowing against other accounts. So we're not having to pay kind of the high interest rates to the bank and bonding and things like that as well. So and then there's another option where it could be someplace in between there. Maybe we want to do a little bit more, but we don't want to do the whole thing within 1 year to try and help balance costs a little bit. Do you want to go through the?
Yeah. So in preparing for this presentation, we just went back and looked through where we're at today with this fund. And for 2020, when you look at your property tax statements, you'll see a line item for Project 17. And that will, and you can look back today, last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and it will show you what your parcels paid in assessments for that particular ditch project. So when you look at that, you'll be able to see what your land is actually paying back. But for 2024, the managers every November, they set the levy amount and they set a $50,000 levy for the maintenance fund for this. And every year they set that. And every year it changes because they have to plan for inflation. They have to plan for, potential things that might happen during a spring flood. And their goal is just to gradually build that account up. Currently, right now, there's $7,637.94 in that account. And you might ask, well, why is there only, $7,600 in that account? Just going back to what we said, even though we levy every year, we do have maintenance that occurs. Some of the maintenance examples are just annual inspection costs. We spray for cattails every year on our systems. Spring flooding repairs that have come up. And just ordinary maintenance that has come up. Some bank repairs, some culverts. I'm sure that you've seen us all out there doing some. And as always, this is all public data. So anytime any landowner wants to see what the expenses are of any ditch system, they can come to the Watershed District and we'll give them a copy of all of the expenses that have been incurred for any ditch system, because like Zach highlighted earlier, we're just the caretakers of that ditch system for you guys. And the board does their best to just manage through that. The next slide, please. So if using your input is how the board is going to make their decision, how they want to go forward and meet the statutory requirements and make sure that that system is running as efficiently as it can, how would they finance this? Like we said, the Drainage Authority can levy for taxes for maintenance, which we do. There are requirements. The maintenance account cannot exceed 20% of the benefits. That's the dollar amount for Project 17. As you can tell, we're nowhere near that, but that's where we have to balance that and ensure that we're not going over that dollar amount. We do generally, and in the past, we've always tried to keep the annual assessments consistent. We don't want any large peaks for it. When they increase the levy for maintenance, they do it on a gradual slope, just to try to build that fund up. Depending on what option is selected, we can borrow from other accounts. So let's just say that you guys, with input and the board decides to go forward with, let's just get this all done. And then we don't have to worry about it for another 20 years or whatever that looks like. The board would say, okay, let's just keep the levy as an example. Now, I'm not the board makes this decision, but they could say, let's keep the levy at 50,000 next year. And then in 5-6 years, it's paid for. So it doesn't mean that in 1 year, our board is going to expect this system to be assessed $400,000 in 1 year. They do have a general principle to try to keep it consistent and gradual. Yeah.
So just to kind of talk through a little bit, when we talk about, we're talking total dollar amounts that would be assessed to a system. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of how that actually relates to maybe the property that you guys own out there. So again, looking at the picture of the system, when this was built not when it was built, actually before it was built, as part of the legal process to develop the project and get the final hearing and all that, there's a group of people called the viewers that the board hires that goes out and assesses benefits and damages from the system, essentially. So they come up with what benefits are for the system. And then essentially when we say, okay, for $50,000, that's pro rata back to those benefits. So the taxes that you may see on the property you own are pro rata relative to the benefits from the system. So just to give you an idea on this system, I apologize for the small text there, but it's a fairly large assessment area. I can't remember the exact acreage on this one. I can look that up here in just a second. But to give you an idea, they assess benefits. They generally tend to lump benefits together. So when you look at this system, these different colors correlate to a different benefit rate per acre. So the red area is $150 per acre is the total benefit that the viewers apply. By contrast, when you go to the south, you have this kind of teal color and this blue color. Those correlate to $75 and $50 per acre, respectively. You see this large orange area to the east of Highway 9, that's $125. And then you see there's additional benefit assessed further to the east from there. One thing to note too is, as a drainage authority, you see this overlapping some of the state-owned land out there. The Drainage Authority does have the ability to tax the state-owned land for drainage benefits. So those acres are receiving a benefit and being taxed accordingly for receiving waters. But So the way this works is essentially, so when we say $50,000 is assessed, all of that is then put back into these different benefit rates pro rata. Okay, so like for example, let's say you have a quarter that fully resides in the highest benefit, okay, the $150 per acre. You have a quarter land and $150 per acre benefit rate. That means the cost, or the assessed cost, is going to be about $1.25 an acre. Okay. So if you have a quarter, take that times 160 acres, the tax for that year would be just under $200. Essentially, that would be tax on that quarter land. And that's across the whole quarter. That's not per acre, so that's for the whole quarter for that $50,000 assessment that would be levied. And it kind of varies a little bit. Obviously, if you have a quarter of land that overlaps two of these colors, it's not going to match up perfect with one of these. It's going to depend on how much of that is within one versus the other, essentially. So that's largely how the assessments are determined. So we just want to kind of show that out there because we talked $50,000, $400,000. Those are big numbers, but we wanted to make sure you had that in the context of what it means for maybe taxes on your individual property.
So just to clarify then, that.
Yep.
If let's just pick on section 24. Whoever owns this pays $200 if the watershed district levied $50,000.
Correct.
That would be correct.
They own 1/4 in section 24.
So in 2024, that is what you can expect on your property tax statement for that particular parcel.
But we only have 7,600 in the account, and we're going to want to build that up whether we clean this whole ditch or not.
No matter what, no matter what decision is made, that is what decision our board made last November, was to levy this system $50,000. And I would expect them to do at least that, or maybe a little more this year, to account for inflation and to keep that fund.
If we're going to do some cleaning, it's going to be above and beyond this. Did you say
that would be a board decision, but you could say, you know what, let's, that's the number we're comfortable with as a board. Let's just keep it at 50,000 and we'll put it in the red for a few years and it will eventually pay itself back. And then gradually increase it 50,000, maybe 60,000 next year, so that it's not any one big hard hit for anybody. But that would, yeah, you're right, Don. It would be a board decision with that.
Yeah, and I will say the watershed is in I feel like a very good position, and you definitely don't see that with every drainage authority board. Just having the ability to kind of borrow funds from other systems, ensure that we're kind of keeping up on maintenance. A lot of times if things are run on the razor thin margin, and something like this comes up that involves going and getting a bond or borrowing money from the bank, well, that creates quite a predicament if all of a sudden we have another 2023 flood and we have substantial damages that we have to repair out there. So from a cash perspective, watershed's sitting in a really good place. So there's I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of options there that watershed has at their disposal. Keep doing the things we're doing. So this is what we want.
So it would be fair to say then, let's just say the watershed district says, okay, now we want to levy 100,000. This section of land would go at about, they would see about $400 on their property for that section, right?
For a quarter.
For a quarter, yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'm not saying that they would do that. It's just for reference that this is what it would look like on your property.
So, we're going to open it up for comments here, but one thing we did want to point out, did everybody get a copy? There should be a presentation that's stapled and then also like a one-page comment form. We'd love to hear feedback from everybody today, but we'd also just ask if you could just scribble your comments down on the form. It would be very helpful for us, just for kind of helping to document, what we hear for feedback, so we can report that back to the board. We do have 3 board managers here as well, but just so the rest of the board can see what type of input we're getting. We did put April 12th on there as a kind of a deadline. The sooner the better, actually. We do have a Watershed board meeting on, I think it's the 4th of April, but recognizing that that could be a quick turnaround in case, people are coordinating with other landowners or renters or things like that as well. So we did want to give it at least enough time to look at this. You'll see on there, there's a QR code for those of you that know how to use those. You can scan that with your phone. That'll take you to the Sand Hill River Watershed District's website. It'll actually take you right to the portion of their website that's the Project 17 or this specific project. We have kind of a place for each project. And after the meeting, we'll post this presentation online. So, if you want to go back and reference it, or if you want to forward the information to another landlord or whatever the case may be, you can by all means certainly do that. And we have plenty of forms here as well. So if you're here representing multiple people, don't be shy about taking them. I think I printed 40 of them, so killed a few trees, I guess, today. But yeah, with that, we can open it up to your guys' thoughts, your comments. Again, we're here to get feedback from you guys. So yeah.
Access.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll let it.
Yes. If there are, if it's in a deficit, then that will pay interest to the watershed districts, larger. But if you're in the positive, you gain interest. So, and that's based on, if we take an average of what our investments are every year, and there's a formula that calibrates that, and whatever the average interest is that we receive as a watershed district is what we receive. And vice versa, that's what you pay if you're in the red. So it would change every year, depending on what.
I think our
We do. We just invested in right now. We got 5.1%. So we did quite well. So right now, if Project 17 did nothing, they had, like I said, we have 7,600 in there, and we'll have another 50,000 by the end of the year. We'd have some maintenance expenses that should be minor this year, but you would gain interest on whatever's sitting in, and that just builds up for the one.
Yeah, so like with the state funds, a lot of that comes through the Minnesota Board of Soil and Water Resources. We've been successful with grants here recently. Most all of them have some type of local component at 100%. So, like a lot of the competitive grants historically have been, it shakes out to be about 80% state, 20% local. So it's pretty, it's worth our time, I guess, to try and find some of these grant funds. Now, ditch clean out, something like this, finding something that qualifies at a state level would be pretty difficult for this type of work. We're trying to leverage it where we can with things like trying to reach as far as we can with slope stability and things like that. So, but yeah, it's pretty lucrative. And then the One Watershed, One Plan implementation funds, there's a committee that will meet annually to allocate funds to that project. And I believe the state requires 10% local.
Actually, I think we can leverage all of it.
Oh, okay. It'll be at the.
We could. I think it's good practice to always have a local buy-in. We think our committee is going to try to recommend that. At least, one other thing to note too, the grant that we have on the outlet, the local share is not coming out of the assessed dollars. We have another pot of money set aside for clean water. So the two projects that we talked about earlier, that we do have potential grant funding for, and then we do have grant funding for, the local share isn't going to come out of that maintenance.
They botched that. They realized that erosion in a ditch hurts clean water. So Zach, can I put you on the spot?
Sure.
I do quite often anyway. From your assessment, how long could we go without doing nothing before it's bad? Of course, we got inflation, but things deteriorate. border shape they're in, it has to be.
I suspect a lot of that's going to be not a lot of what's been fueling what we've been seeing here is the recent severe spring flooding. I suspect we're getting a lot of sediment coming off fields during the springtime. And we get another couple of floods like we've had the last 2 springs, that's going to accelerate things. But boy, I mean, how long could we go? That's a sort of a loaded question. I mean, 3, 4, 5 more years maybe, but that can all change with one big flood.
Do you expect that because we've had such a dry year, that doing a ditch this year would take less time?
It would certainly help. I think in a perfect world on these deep ditches, if you can actually get down in there with like a D8 dozer, the bottom's wide enough where you can actually do the bottom. I think the problem we have here is it's gone for so long without doing anything now that we have so much up and down and water, even during dry years, there's so much water that sits in the bottom of it. I think it's largely all going to be wet and mucky. It's all going to be excavator work. It's going to involve somebody sitting on the bank and scooping it up. So it will help though from the standpoint there'll be less, if we went out to bids, if it stays dry.
To get in there earlier.
Obviously, if it rains 3 inches and the ditch is full for a week, that may stop. That could hold things for up to a month. Yep.
This project here, do you think this has more priority than some of the other things that we consider can be cleaned first?
Well, each ditch system kind of functions on their own. So like as a ditch authority, we have to look at each system individually. If there's other ditch systems out there that are under the watershed's care, and we'd be more than happy to hear those comments about those systems. If there's things we need to take a look at for inspection this spring and prioritize cleaning other systems, they'd be a completely separate finance mechanism. So they almost have to be treated, separately by the ditch system. The funds don't overlap, I guess is what I'm trying to say in terms of the accounts. So.
With which,
Yeah.
south of section 26.
So these ones here,
Right.
those are county ditch systems. So the county manages those. Rich Sanders would be the ditch authority for that. If you want to see those clean, you have to call Rich.
90 and 46.
Yep.
We've got ditch 90 and ditch 46.
90, 46, yeah, those are all county ditch systems, so we have no jurisdiction to help with those. Unless landowners wanted to petition the county to turn them over to us. We will take them if landowners want them. So we definitely talk to Rich about that. But last I talked to him, he's open to it if that's what landowners want. And we did have a meeting there last year to talk about all of these systems and what that might look like. And there was consensus, I thought, that landowners would like to see some of those clean, but I'm not sure where Rich is at with that.
Well, at that meeting, we talked about ditch 46, maybe doing an improvement up there.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason you saw us there at the watershed at that meeting is sort of gets messy, and I think it's confusing for some of us that live in this world every day. But you have county systems and you have watershed systems. If the watershed exists where the county system is, and let's say you as landowners petition for an improvement, that automatically becomes the watershed ditch. So it's a little convoluted. I can only imagine you guys that don't live in the world trying to understand the way that works, but that's why we would have been at that meeting. What was that last spring?
Yeah, to see if that's what landowners wanted, we were ready to help and get that going. But it kind of sounded like at that time, they wanted to just see things clean, like you had mentioned. So maybe give Rich another call. Yeah. You're over here, aren't you? right here.
That's when we felt like you're going to want to get planted. That's right. But we, when you know that school, those these emphases will stop. And I'm a lot of what the taxes are much more for them.
Yeah, so
This we're having is
So you aren't charged anymore for the construction of the project. The only thing that you'll see on your property tax, which is nothing new, you've seen that for the last, well, 10 years, maintenance for this project, but not the implementation of construction of any more. That's paid for since 20.
that's just being the more long I would be literally really fast.
where are they at?
Okay, so there is a ditch system right here. This one that takes the water straight to the sand.
You're talking about.
On the west side of the world, they build themselves up building.
What you're talking about, right? Yeah, up in this area. Well, in terms of assessing,
The only way to, if you feel like your assessments are wrong and you shouldn't be paying that, the only way to get around that, I think, being we're here now, that proceeding took place in 2006 of who was going to be assessed is to do a redetermination. And that's costly. If people feel like the benefits are not consistent with where they should be, we have to redetermine the system and invoke that statutory process. Yeah. So during the redetermination process, then you would be able to contest it at that time. Yeah. I mean, when the viewers assess it, they're looking at where every parcel goes. And it either goes north or east. And if your water goes there, that's how they evaluated it. I'd have to really dig that thing. It would show that. And I can look back into the notes and see what that would like with that too. But it probably isn't going to stop what's already been invoked in 2006. But it maybe will provide an explanation to you. We didn't feel it. So if I'm looking at this right, Zach, it looks like Maple Creek goes south a little bit and then it heads back up north.
Yep.
And outlets directly in the project 17 right here. So any water here that enters Maple Creek has to go somewhere and it goes directly into the ditch. Correct?
yeah, and you know,
On right here.
They come from a different ditch system, comes into your.
You're saying these people up here drain onto you? These people up here drain onto you is what you're saying? Yeah. onto Maple. So this is their drainage that they're using this across of 44.
On the side.
Well, all of these people in color are assessed. All of these people that have a color are assessed to use this system. So which neighbor? Okay. Okay. Oh, well, everybody that has a color associated on this map is assessed to this system. If it's not, if it's in the green, the non-color area, they are not assessed or viewed as draining into that system. So we can talk about that after the meeting. You can show us maybe on the map exactly. Are there other questions or any other input that you guys see? What, maybe I could just ask the question and somebody be willing to volunteer. What do you guys see out there when you drive by? Do you see a need for cleaning at this time? I'm not looking at you, Elliot, but I'm looking at you. You're right on the system. You know?
So I would be in that where it's at now. I'm going to take a little bit for computer. Either way, right? So then you can stuff on it. Hopefully you don't have the top really. You know, if you don't do anything, eventually you'll get.
So you like a phased out approach. Either way, the funding for you guys is going to be phased out. So financially, it's going to be the same way. It would just be the convenience of having it all done in 1 year and being done with it, or having a contractor come up with a slow burn, you know, and take 5 years to clean it. Right? Okay.
And you're
And I would say the reason we haven't done action data is largely because that bond. Now, we've also done with just been some changes with the Watershed. The bond went out in 2016. Before that, my recollection of the effort was bond is on those landowners. You don't want to put a lot of additional maintenance on it. So
we didn't levy a lot of maintenance while you guys were still paying back the construction. Yeah, and we definitely did talk about that as a board. Do we do it on a phased out approach, or do we just do it all in 1 year so the landowners don't have construction people in their way when they're farming, and we just get it all done? Get the buffer seeded and just have it all done in 1 year versus having, you know, do 2 miles a year or something like that. Because either way, you're still going to pay the same levy every year, regardless, as a landowner. Well, we wouldn't bond it. We would, I mean, I can't speak for the board, but that would be my recommendation to them, is that we just use our reserve account to pay for this amount. And then have the landowner slowly pay it back.
So board speed, do it all at once.
They haven't had that discussion. Both options have been discussed. And that's why they asked me to have a landowner meeting to see, what do you guys want? What's most convenient for you guys? They're just the caretakers of the ditch. They have the statutory responsibility to ensure that the drainage is where it needs to be according to the construction plans. I think they're open to ideas.
one thing I will say, expect to throw the last minute opinion on it, so I'd like to share it with you all. It's, you know, to do the phased approach, you may still want to consider doing something more than $50,000 a year. Largely just because this clean out is bigger than maybe like a typical ditch clean out, and to incentivize the type of contractors that have the equipment that could get in there and get this done efficiently. There may be value in trying to do a little bit else.
You're saying if you do a phased out approach, don't
Maybe
have them
it's-
come in just for the 30 grand, have them,
Yeah, maybe
if they're
it's-
going to mobilize, they want to
maybe
do
you're doing 5 miles 1 year and then. Could be correct. Yeah, you're going to pay a lot of money in mobilization. I imagine something like this, a couple excavators on site, going to have a builder on site to spread material. We're doing it in the summer. We're not going to let them put it on crops. So they'll have to come back again. Maybe some value there, just given the scope of the project. We want to do the phased approach, more of the something in.
Peggy has a question here. She said, is this the first time this has been a problem? And is there a more permanent solution so we don't have this all the time?
Yeah, like through the ditch systems, we try and prevent these problems as much as we can. I think the more permanent solution, now that the bond is paid off, is use our funds to stay maybe up a little bit more on it than what we have in the past. But that being said, this system we do put quite a bit of effort in and try and keep the sediment where on the field. So along the system, I think almost every kind of lateral field drain that goes into the ditch has a culvert with a trap. What that does is when you get the big flood, it allows that water to kind of pond and be metered. So a lot of that sediment drops out and stays on the field essentially. So we try to through practices. We only have control with what we can do in the right way on that. We try and slow it down as much as we can, but fortunately, cleaning systems like that is kind of a part of ongoing maintenance.
One of the things I think that the board has done in the last 4 years been really good for all of our systems is the helicopter comes and sprays for cattails. And I think that has reduced our maintenance significantly to keep up on that. And we're not doing as much. We did one big, he sprayed all of our systems, and now it's just touch up. He applies it when he does the county systems, and when he sees it, he zaps it. And I think that's been helpful, but maybe not.
As long as they don't spray the stuff.
I know that was the first year, and his system, that's what I heard. It was off just a very millimeter, and he was spraying the
Approaches.
He got chastised for it, I think, the county and the Watershed board, and we did our best to mitigate that, but that's better now. Right? No, maybe.
I haven't seen that first year.
He said he corrected the error of his paper. It was a technical difficulty mishap, I guess.
How many models?
Yeah.
What's that?
How many models?
Oh, that's a very good question. So
Did you say 12 months?
it's about 11 miles from Climax to Highway 9, and then I suppose we have another 2, so 13, about 15 miles.
And we're not looking at cleaning here or here. At this point. It would just be from here to here is where we've noticed.
Next time we we'll talk to this thing. We'll
He does. He's supposed
They're
to.
on-
They're on a
This is
schedule.
a 3-year rotation.
So April, you said you're not going to clean
We didn't,
east of Highway 9,
we didn't see a need for that at this time.
but we still will be levied
Yep.
money towards the cleanup because
Yes.
yeah,
This, we just,
Okay.
the maintenance is really just for where they need.
okay,
But now we build the fund up, and if there's a spot that needs cleaning here, the maintenance fund will take care of that as well.
okay.
It's just that there isn't a need for it that we've identified. But if there was, the watershed district would take care of it.
It's only going to get more expensive too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like they say, it's not going to get any cheaper
No,
than it is today to do it. But we really wanted to know, do the landowners see the need? What is your drainage like out there?
Well, I guess my opinion on it is, when we built the ditch, the first years we had trouble where some of the over Project 12 and down at the towards the mouth down here where we had some bigger ditches coming in like this, you know, and it blew into the bank on the across the ditch because everything was soft and new. And so we battled that for a while and kind of got that solidified. They put a bunch of rocks and stuff up. What really in our watershed, we have so darn much drop from here to here. And so it's just like a funnel, and then it gets flat out here. And so you have velocity of water, and that's what really does your damage. And I guess my fear is, not a fear, but when I look at the Sandhill River and ditch to the south, and as much disrepair as that is in, geez, I don't ever want our ditch to end up like that.
Mhm.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, that'd be well put.
How many feet of drop is this action?
Yeah. Really good question. I don't have the answer to that.
Other than
A lot.
Well, the Sandhill ditch, I bet you know them numbers.
Yeah, well, you're kind of dealing with the beach ridge, so it's, you know, well, I can, maybe I can.
Fertile to Beltrami is doing 75 feet or.
Then you get from, Beltrami.
Here to here was 70.
Say it was under it. It's quite a bit less in terms of slope, and even the slope of the channel. I think this was designed at this is like a 0.03% slope, and you don't have to know what that means in terms of a fall per mile, but the reference, you know, on these upper reaches and some of these upper systems, they're about double that in slope. A lot of that's because of the topography, and even with that steeper slope, we still have a lot of like rocks, right? It's just that the lay of the land, you know, you're dealing with the beach ridge, the old beach ridge glacial lake Agassiz.
This is new, not the last year.
No, just to the west, to the east. It's this piece right here.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Did you have a question?
Yeah.
I think that's.
We haven't done a survey yet. I would suspect, just based on what I'm seeing, it's probably right. A little bit less to the east of 9. The other part there too is kind of an order of operations for cleaning the system. We feel like it makes sense to start at the bottom. Yep. In fact, our goal would be to minimize disturbance. So the folks I've been talking to about folks be to use tractor sites so to minimize disturbance. Try and we have good vegetation stand there. I'll be careful not to be picking it up. Oh, are you talking the field backflow? I'm sorry. Yeah, it would be that. It would be what's out there now, or even flat. No. We could work with individual landowners. Something goes up.
Well, there's a dip here there, but you're not going to be able to wire.
Right. In general, what they'll do is, something like this, if we did it as one, I imagine the contractor would go out and they would likely want a good chunk of the summer to do the work, but there's a lot of miles there. Generally, they'll pile it up. The idea that they come back after harvest and then they just use it.
We can maybe get those piles left at the same time, right on I-9 there.
It doesn't always work that way, but I always try and either myself or who's ever out in the field try and be in contact with the landowner to develop a mile ahead of it, just in case there's any like losses across property. Within reason, obviously. So, all the just pile.
all of these things. Understand because of the phrase on years ago, using clean. In the photo.
Yeah, our goal would be to work.
So if there's no other questions, I think just for reference, then we'll put this presentation online so you can go back. I'll put some meeting notes out there so everybody can read them and go from there. And then just follow along on our website. We post our minutes every single month so you can kind of follow along with where we're at in the process. Always call. Our meetings are always public, so you're always welcome to attend. But definitely call and we'll try to move through that. And I think our board does a really good job of listening to everybody's concerns and actually addressing them. I mean, well, we'll take your feedback. They could do it in May, or they might say for June. They might say, "Oh, let's wait a year," or let's take action. Either way, the levy isn't. I wouldn't anticipate the $50,000 levy to change. You know, or if anything, it would still increase because we still have to have a maintenance fund. So I wouldn't anticipate them to do anything. In the past, they've never taken drastic measures to increase that levy substantially. They like to keep it slow and consistent.
Yeah, and if we do a larger, either the whole project or a large chunk at once, we'd have to talk to the board, but there may be value in getting everything ready to bid it this fall. So the contractor kind of has a lot longer window to plan for. We generally, if you try and kind of cram it in there and bid it, then let's say we open bids in August, by the time you award them and they mobilize, it might be end of September, and then they're dealing with a tight window, and you generally pay for that.
We'll have to evaluate that, I guess.
Yeah.
It's my question was,
Yeah.
you do a phase in now and then next year you find out that there's flood. Oh, why didn't we?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yep.
Yeah. And then you just put more sediment back into what you just cleaned. Yeah. We've noticed that too. If we only do partial ones, it just builds up in one spot and then backs up on other people. It's good practice if you can do it.
So if we did a major cleanup and then after that, say you just levied so much each property, yeah, what kind of dollars are you talking about there?
I would anticipate, the levies usually don't go backwards. They don't go down. You know,
Right.
Once you set
Right.
your levy, it's either that and then it gradually increases to accommodate the changing needs of the times.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, I wouldn't anticipate that to change much because we have to have a maintenance levy built up.
Right.
You know, we've been pretty generous, I think, by not levying while you guys were paying that bond off. Well, now it's time to build that fund up so that when things like this arise, we have the funding to be able to do that. So you guys have the drainage that you paid.
So if we in 2016 finished paying the bond off and we've been paying 50 grand a year
It
since.
hasn't been 50 grand a year since.
Yeah.
We just increased that slowly. I think I'd have to really look back, but I think it started at 10 grand, and we've just slowly increased it. Last year we talked a lot as a board about this system, knowing that we have some maintenance needs coming. So we can't just sit there at 20 grand a year, knowing what's coming down the pike. We had to build that fund. But you're right, Don. 2017, the levy didn't look like this.
If we did 50 grand since 2017.
We wouldn't be having this meeting, right?
Or I was going to say, if we only got $76, where's our money?
Well,
But we haven't been collecting it.
we haven't been collecting it, and we did have some maintenance. We had, like you said, that ditch from the north came in and it ate that whole bank that we had to pay. There has been some things that we've had to repair because they were emergent. We tried, I don't know what year it was, but right on Elliott's place there, that slough tried to repair it. It failed right away. But those things come at a cost. There's a few major maintenance things that they've done in the past that have taken away from the maintenance fund. But again, those are all public information anytime any of you want to come in and see every single check that's been issued on the system. It's yours, so that's available to you.